recording now. Fucking, let's go. Hopefully something picks up. All right. Okay. We're gonna shot. All right. This is the pilot episode. This is the Performance Matters podcast. I'm Coach Matrixx. This is Coach Myles over here on my left. Right. Y'all been asked for this. We've been thinking about this for years. We're finally doing it. So, pilot episode. We're just gonna shoot the shit. All right. Not much filters going on here, so pretty much gonna kick things off. Let's talk about teams. Let's talk about the projects we're working on, and let's talk about, I don't know, the biggest.
How about some wins of the week?
There you go, wins of the week.
Athlete, non-athlete, doesn't matter. First wins of the week, Rachel Markunis got her first chin-up. Been chasing that for months. Yeah, she absolutely smoked it, almost got two. But nonetheless, first chin-up, Rachel Markunis, that's a huge accomplishment, highly coveted, obviously, in the female population, so that was huge. Another big one is our very own OG Mike Craig is in the top 90 for the Hobie Baker voting, which is absolutely freaking incredible. That's like essentially the Heisman of hockey. So that's absolutely huge. Super proud of him for that.
Shout out Mike Craig.
Shout out Mike Craig. So on the, those are probably the big ones there on the individual client kind of side, but I don't know if you want to dive into teams. Teams are doing pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's so far like the biggest progressions I've seen that I'm very proud of. They're going to be like our 18 boys team, Rapids, top 3 in the province right now. Fantastic work ethic, and I think they really drive home the fact that we've been preaching to other teams as well. It's just like it's not so much what we're doing; it's how we're supposed to be doing it, the intent we drive behind it, little things that make a huge impact, right? Being on time, competing on your A series with your sprints, simple shit like just putting your stuff away together, not being selfish and just kind of going off, packing your bags up while your teammates are putting all their weights away. It's like small things like that are going to make a huge impact, and they do those small things well. So, and I'm hoping a lot more other teams can emulate that behavior, which is fantastic. So, proud of that.
It's a good point. I like, even with, I was watching Gracie this morning push the sled, and even yesterday it was awesome. Owen Taylor and Anthony Federico were going after it on the sled to kind of, they both had the sled drag, so they're kind of throwing on plates on each other in between sets and kind of push each other, kind of turn into like a kind of friendly competition.
Yeah.
And obviously we know like competition breeds success. But even I was looking at Gracie this morning. I like something like the sled because obviously we're doing squats, we're doing bench, we're telling them how much weight to put on the bar, depending on the adaptation we're trying to get. But I'll just put like heavy sled march. I'll let the kids self-select the loads. And I look at Gracie today. She puts 2 or 3 plates on the sled, something she's never done before, and she just gets after it. And then at the end, she's just laying on the ground, And I thought to myself, like, the kids who are willing to push that hard without me telling them, I never said she could have put 0 plates on the thing, whatever, right? I said just heavy sled march. And she's willing to put a amount of weight on there that's going to make her literally lay there, breathless, kind of dying at the end. I'm like, those are the kids that really are going to be successful. Like, the kids that want to come in and get pushed and be told what to do, that's great. But the kids who are willing to push themselves there without being told, that's like Anthony. Like, the other day, the one young team was watching him push, 700 pounds on the sled or something, and they're kind of gawking, like, oh my God, it's incredible. I said, yeah, girls, it is incredible, but, I'm like, again, I never told him what to put on there. I'm like, so, because the girl's like, I can never do that. I'm like, maybe not that absolute weight you can't do, but the mentality that allows this guy to get paid to do what he does for a living and play football professionally is he just went and put that weight on there because he wants it, because he's willing to work and he's willing to push to that dark place, like I said, without being told. Like, I think that kind of aligns with what you're saying with the teams.
Yeah, I think it goes, it's a big message to say. It's not just the end result with these things. Like, it's beyond the sets and reps of just the weights and everything else we're fucking trying to do. It's something bigger than that. Like, you can just tell. I think we've been in the game long enough. We can just tell when someone has that. You know what I mean? Like, and it goes back to the small things. It's the work ethic, the attitude. Like, there's kids we have that just show up. Doesn't matter what you throw at them. Guys like Pick, for example, like, always in a good mood, always positive, never complains. Even if he's tired, so he'll never tell you anything. And maybe it's not always a good thing, but my point being, he'll always find a solution to his problem. There's always a question he's asking. It's not like I can't because. He's asking the question like, how can I? And we work collaboratively to drop the game plan and rematch the game plan. But those are the kind of guys you look at and you're like, what else can I throw at this guy that he's not just going to run through? And we haven't found that, which is fantastic because now his ceiling just keeps going up and up and up. And then you realize that the more capability this guy is building, it's like, how do you break a guy like that? He doesn't just have a breaking point, which is exactly what you'd like. It doesn't matter what you throw at him. He just does it. Just the intent you ask him to do it at, he focuses on the small details and hammers what he can control. And then he just goes again, repeat, consistency, over and over and over again. And sometimes I think we see athletes that always kind of find that Achilles heel where they get caught up in the thing that they validate in their head. And again, not saying it's not always important. I'm saying there has to be a fine line where you can perform regardless of how you feel, the sensation versus stimulation thing. But it's more than just that. You know what I mean? It goes beyond here, right? Like how you do in school, how you do in your social life, all of that basic shit. Like it's bigger than that. You tend to see good people do good things regularly because of just how they conduct themselves on a day-to-day parallel, really.
Yeah, it's like toxic negativity and toxic positivity are equally contagious.
Very,
It's just like which one do you want to be, right? I'm talking to the one team last night, and they're like, I'm doing a pretty good breakdown, and they had some marginal progress from maybe the last time, so I was highlighting a lot of good things, but I was kind of giving them a bit of a reality check, and they're like, you guys have so many like good sayings. How do you guys like come up with all this stuff? I said, I don't come up with it because I sit at home and try to think of catchy shit to tell you. I said, I come up with it because I believe in it and I've lived it, and so he's lived it, and Aiden's lived it. So I'm like, I've been on really good teams, talent-wise, who went 1-7, who went 4-4, barely made the playoffs, and then the next year had most of the same guys. We didn't just get a bunch more talent. We just worked better together, more congruently, support each other. Next thing you know, maybe you win a championship. I'm like, it's not by accident, right? So that was kind of a funny example last night. They're like, how do you come up? I said, don't just sit at home and just try to come up with shit or just Google it. I'm like, I'm just speaking from the heart, like stuff I've lived through or been around, at least experienced. And it's like success and failure both leave clues, right? I kept trying to tell the kids that kind of last night. So I think I was getting through to them, but it's just a constant reminder, right? And not only a reminder of just harping on them, but examples, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes you almost like move past those things where you can kind of evolve, but sometimes we always kind of get caught up in the same message. It's like, I'm hoping not to have to repeat this message again. I'm hoping we kind of get it so we can actually highlight more of like now we can grow on this point. Now we can progress on this point. Now we're narrowing the window of failure versus just kind of saying, hey, we're still kind of working in the same spot mentally and with the intent. So it's kind of like, how do we get that message clear cut? So I think hammering the small things repeatedly hopefully will kind of drive the point. But also, there's things outside the weight room we can't control. We don't know what's going on at home. We don't know how coaches are running the practice sometimes. You don't know the message they're saying, which is why we always try to emphasize communication being a huge talking point. It's just like it matters, right? We have to kind of have the same vision, and it should be trickled down to us, and so we can help support the vision, support the message of what the coach wants, right? Like it's his team or her team. So it's like, what do you want from this team? What are your standards of expectation? How can we uphold the standard of expectation? At the same time, we put them in our environment where we also have a lot of other high performance athletes, which is kind of fun because you have your team stuff going on, and you also have these individual athletes that are, superior abilities, superior levels in their own respects. That should almost heighten the thing, which we, 90% of the time see that. Like a lot of people adapt to their environment in that respect. So, it's a fine balance. And again, some people are younger and everything else like that, so sometimes they get goofy. But, I think the direction that overall they're going in is relatively positive. I think there's some good things to highlight. I think there's always going to be some things to work on for the most part, but I think this particular groups, I should say, I think we're a lot better than last season overall, and I'm excited to see how we do in April for these particular teams. And honestly, same goes for our college teams. I think we're talking to the girls this morning. I think we've had a pretty good season in terms of relative wins and loss percentages compared to last season. So things look positive in that respect too, right? So
I think it's funny too because the kids are so mature, and because they do so many incredible things in a weight room, on the court, on the ice, on the field, whatever. It's easy to forget that they are kids.
Yeah.
So like it's very easy for me to sometimes try to treat them like adults and then kind of take a step back and be like, in my head maybe I'm like, haven't I already taught you that lesson? Like, how'd you forget? And then I'm like, man, what were you like in grade 9? Like, yeah, you were trying your hardest, and I think I like to had a good attitude and stuff, but I probably forgot shit too all the time. And coaches probably had to, had to remind me 100 times too, even though I
bang your head in the wall.
Exactly. So it's that's a little bit humbling, I think, from me to me. Sometimes it'd be like, man, they are kids. Like, yeah, you do have to remind them. You do have to stay on top of them. They do want to work hard, and that's a big thing today. People like kids are lazy. That's absolutely fucking nonsense. Kids are not lazy. These kids want to be led. They just need to be led, right? I think people are a lot of the time, adults are too lazy to lead them. They just expect them to know everything. I think it's absolutely nonsense to put those labels on the kids because our kids in here do incredible stuff all the time. So there's in no way are kids lazy. That's absolutely nonsense. It's just lazy leadership, and that's, I think, part of as much as the sets and reps, but that's the other culture shift we're trying to make too. These kids, we lead them. They want to be led. They do incredible things. It's not a coincidence, right?
No, it starts at the top. Like, it has to be a shared message, and there has to be standards. If the standards keep changing, they're no longer standards, right? We should be able to hold, athletes accountable, and of course, like, age is always going to be a consideration, but it's managing expectations. What are the expectations? Make them very transparent, and then just uphold them. There's going to be, certain things you have to kind of go over, certain hurdles and everything else like that. But at the end of the day, it's like, regardless of their age, they are still part of an organization that has a reputation, that have their own ambitions, that are trying to move up in the ranks, they're trying to produce better quality athletes, and hopefully send them on to post-secondary aspirations. Like we're trying to build something that becomes the funnel of like people go to this region essentially to become the best at their respective crafts. So there has to be an understanding. I think it comes down across the top level, like who are the people managing the top line there, and then obviously we're going to be a huge part of that as well. So okay, like what is the vision that we have, and how do you want us to hold them accountable? Like what is expected, and then if things go astray, what do you expect to happen? And I think having no game plan for that, like I think having those hard conversations, always nice to say all the nice, positive, fluffy stuff, but it's like the question is like, what do we do when things go wrong? Because they are going to go wrong. So what do we do when shit hits the fan? Right? And then just be very clear. That way it's very transparent. If somebody is goofing around, for example, it's like, no, we're not going to run gassers. That's bullshit, by the way. Like, make sure any of you coaches watching out there, if you're watching this shit, don't use physical punishment. Like, there's no point in making them do 100 burpees, push-ups, sprints, winders, gassers, you're going to call them. It's nonsense.
Kids are already in shape. It's not going to do anything.
No, and they're going to have a negative connotation with exercise.
Right.
Like, that is terrible. You don't want them to hate exercise as a punishment. I think a more fair thing is going to be like, you just sit out. It's like, you're goofing off. You're not going to take away from everyone else. Go sit over there. Go home. Do what you got to do. Be better next time. We'll have that conversation. But I think that's a more fair thing to do. And hopefully that, again, in my opinion, I think that would help people realize that it's a privilege. Like you've earned your spot on the team. A coach has selected you as part of the team. There are standards and expectations that come with that acceptance. If you are accepting the role that they've presented to you, that you've earned, and you accept, then you have to abide by the standards. That includes practices, that includes games, training, that includes community work. I don't think enough people do the community work. Like you're representative of your team in the region. I think that matters. No different than our pro guys. They have community, engagements. They have community involvement requirements. So,
ironically, the best guys are willing to do that stuff the most.
Yeah,
right?
It's everything parallels.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing separate from the other. All these little actions parallel. Like the intent they put behind it, and the consistency, and just the work they put into every aspect. It parallels to everything else. It's hard to be discipline in one thing and very poor in another thing that's only going to be supportive of your ambition anyway. So I really think that those are conversations that need to be had more frequently. And I think just reaffirmed that we just can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater every fucking time something goes fucking wrong. You know what I mean? Like there has to be like some strict boundaries on these things. And the more you like label these athletes, they start to believe this shit. Next thing you know, they're always defaulting back to, oh, I can't because I got this, oh, I have this. It's like, fuck off. And like, I guess shit goes wrong. It's like, let's find a solution. There's always a way to get better. I refuse to believe that there's nothing we can do to get better. You can be in a fucking full body cast. Get some mental reps in. Be with your team. That alone will keep you sane. Be with your team, right? Watch film, say some encouraging words. I was saying this to our team last night too, which I think they actually did really well last night. So this is not anything against that. They actually worked really well. I think the point that I was trying to make last night was be the training partner you want. Right? I think what we say too is be selfish enough to see what you're capable of doing, right? Find out the truth, but be selfless enough to empower your teammates to do the same. If I'm working with my group, my training partners, it's like I have an obligation to myself to make sure I'm doing the best I can. I have an obligation to them to help them be their best. And I think I reinforced the point last night, for example, where, hey, if you're doing this and you're waiting around to get in, keep them accountable. Count their tempos. Count their tempos for them. That's one less thing they have to think about. Count their tempos, encourage them, right? If you notice something like they're off, like tell them, hey, fix this or do that. Like be those mini coaches, be those mini leaders within your little realm. And everyone else gets, a rising tide raises all ships. Like just do those small things. And I would expect the same back from them. Like, hey, if I'm doing that for them, hey, you owe it to me to do the same thing. Like I want to get better. Help me get better too. Like it should be like a team within a team thing. And I think anyone can have that leadership role, regardless of your skill on the court, the field, the pool, whatever.
Yeah, you don't need a C on your jersey to be a captain.
Yeah, you don't need You don't need a C on your fucking jersey to be a captain.
Or to be a leader anyway. You don't need a C on your jersey to be a leader is what I mean.
Yeah.
Even it's funny because last night I was having like pretty much the same talk with the one team I was working with, and I was like, guys, that's the blessing and the curse of team sports. I'm like, if I say to you, you got to go on the weekend tournament, you got to rely on the girl beside you, it's going to invoke one of two emotions. You're going to go, oh shit, or you're going to go, oh thank God, because I know that girl beside me is an absolute dog. And I was like, your actions every day is what's going to answer that question. It's not about if you like each other, whatever, it's irrelevant. It's the work you put in every day, winning today. That's what's going to really decide what emotion that's going to evoke, right?
Yeah, I think it's the exact same point. I think it's realizing that even if you're a starter, even if you're the starter, you still need good practice players.
Right.
You need a good second string, right?
Yeah.
Like to elevate your competition, like you're going to be playing good teams, top teams in the province and the country. It's like you only get X amount of exposures in a season. You might play those teams in a province twice, maybe 3 times, depending on how many tournaments or games you have. So it's like, how do you emulate that competition, right? In certain sports, it's going to be like, it's the same drills, it's just at a faster pace, right? With less chances of error, right? The accuracy has to be, like the precision has to be more precise. There's less room for error because your practice partners will help expose you.
Right.
So it's like, even if you're a starter, like you need to help make your practice players or your second stringers better.
So they can make you better.
So they can make you better.
Because you're not just going to figure it out on game day. That's the thing that kids, I think, sometimes have a hard time figuring out. What does rise to the occasion? I'm like, doesn't exist. You're just going to fall to the level of your preparation, which again, if somebody told me I was going to fall to the level of my preparation, I'd be like, oh, thank God. Because I really believe I emptied the tank and I did everything I could, physically, mentally, tactically, up on the whiteboard to prepare. Other people, if I said, you're going to fall to the level of your preparation, they might be like, oh, shit. Yeah. Like, I wasn't really too confident in my prep because they look back and they think, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, didn't. Yeah. And now they're like, well, what's that going to look like when I fall to that level? Yeah, right?
Happens every season at some point. I think it's just I think it's kind of help reaffirming, like everyone that kind of says the words team, sacrifice, discipline, work ethic. They're fantastic words, but now they're becoming trendy buzzwords versus like, do you know what that means? Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. What does it mean? What does it look like?
What does it mean? What does it look like to you? And then furthermore, like, what does it mean to look like to you? Because if I think I'm working hard, but you don't think I'm working hard, well, what does it mean to you? Because we should be on the same page with that. If we're going to rely on each other in a game, whether it be basketball, volleyball, football, whatever, there should be understanding of like, we're on the same page with, how we communicate, how we, define what our ethic and our discipline and everything else is. So,
how we manage chaos.
Hey, how appropriate. This is it. We're managing the chaos.
It's a good point, like you said, that one older team that's doing really well right now in the province, and how the guys emulate all those. It's easy enough to say culture, or standards. The one quote I heard the other day was pretty cool. He was a D1 football coach. I can't remember what team, but he was like, if the standards are upheld by the players, that's culture. If the standards are upheld by the coaching staff, they're just rules, right? Because at the end of the day, because the athletes are the one on the court, on the ice, on the field, doing the damn thing. It's not the coaches. So it's one thing to sit up there and bark at them and say, these are what we want you to emulate. If they don't do it, they're just rules. You're just spitting at them. Once you get the athletes buying in and actually like kind of leading from the front, from their position, then it actually becomes culture, right?
Yeah, upholding the rules becomes a standard, becomes a culture. Upholding that makes sense.
They're not just rules; it's just culture, right?
Yeah, and I think it's funny. We have these conversations. We have these fucking conversations all the time. But I think coaches need to be involved in that aspect. I think too, especially because we have a wide realm of knowledge and experience with a variety of age groups, variety of teams, variety of leagues and levels, and not just boots on the ground sets and reps. I'm talking like from an organizational team-based perspective of operations. Like we have so much experience on having those conversations with coaches and saying, like from our experience, here's what we've seen work well. Here's where we've seen issues. Here's how we kind of solve those issues. Here's where we're sort of struggling with those issues. And then just getting some feedback, like, how do you handle these things? Great. Yeah. So it's like, if that's how it works, like, have you had success with that? If so, maybe that's a tool in our toolbox we can use. But vice versa, maybe there's tools in our toolbox they can use. And if we all have the same vision, same message, same, upholding of the standards, upholding the standards, if we kind of be on the same page with that, it just is just reaffirming the message to them. And then if they understand that, now they can uphold it. But at the same time, too, we have to understand, like, coaches have to pick their teams. Like, I think another issue a lot of teams have is, like, you have a couple players sometimes that just take away from it. And I think it's just human nature sometimes, too. Like, if you're uncomfortable in a situation, you might default to certain behaviors because you don't want to be the only one, right?
So I said toxic positivity, toxic negativity, equally contagious. So which one you want to be, right?
Yeah.
It's so true.
It's like you tend to see certain people conglomerate because like they feel uncomfortable and they're
safe space.
Yeah, and all of a sudden now they have 2 or 3 other people around them that all feel the same way. And just they empower each other to kind of be subpar or
nobody wants to be the only quitter.
Yeah.
But now there's a couple, right? It's enabling. It is though. It's enabling. Now there's a couple. It's like, okay, at least no one's gonna point out at me because I'm the quitter because there's a couple of us. It's enabling. It's all it is, right?
Yeah. So I think it's bringing that to the forefront to the coaching staff and saying, hey, we're noticing this trend. Like, what do you like us to do about it? And of course, we have our ways that we can deal with it too, but it has to kind of line up with the sport coach wants because obviously we work for them. So it's a deep rabbit hole, this shit. But I think the whole point is going to be just how can we have those conversations, and then if we start the game plan, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater when shit goes wrong, because shit will go wrong. It's just how can we find elegant simplicity as we work through that chaos.
Yeah, pretty much no championship team ever went undefeated.
No.
But you lose a game or two and people panic, right? It's like,
yeah,
hey, listen.
I get it. It's a wins and losses fucking business, but
no championship team ever went undefeated. So
no,
it's like,
I think there's like, I think it's, again, I'll go on another tangent, but I think, for example, if we have 20 games in a season,
yeah,
like you need to have, it goes back to good second stringers, good practice players, but in order to actually get better for them, they also need exposure too.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have 20 games in a season, I think really sitting down and being like, okay, guys, we need to absolutely win these games. Here's the ones we can afford to whatever, and then here's the ones I plan on putting my practice players in starting, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that way it's like, I get it. You always want to win every game. I'm never going to say like, no, don't win, but it's more like,
there comes a point you've clinched playoffs, you clinch a home game in
0-0.
the playoffs. It's like you don't, and you have 3 games left still.
yeah.
Some of the backups can kind of get their feet wet, right?
Yeah, it gives your starters a break,
Yeah.
let them kind of that, you know what I mean? Like they can still get the practice reps in. Their second stringers are out there developing their skills in a real-time situation. And I believe, like, hey, at playoffs, it's 0-0. You're going to face the best anyway. I get it. Like, based on seeding, you might have an easier way to the final, which, again, we always want a medal. So there are some strategies, and it's not, it's not a blanket statement. But just off the top of my head, I'm like, I don't care where I finish. Like, did I qualify for the show? Then it's 0-0 regardless of where I am in the show. I'm going to have to beat everybody in front of me at some point. So...
yeah, there's no lucking or faking your way to the championship.
You
You just got to win it.
Yeah, it's... So I think having, that conversation can obviously, I think, just ease some tension to ease some stress where like your starters always feeling get beat up and the coach always feel like we have to win, you have to win. It's like, but when do they get the opportunity to practice? When do they actually get the opportunity to practice their newly learned skills in a real-time situation, right? There has to be a point where like, I'm okay if this doesn't go as planned. Or maybe even like a compromise, like, hey, we'll put them in. If we're like down by this set or down at this half of the game, okay, now the starters will go in to save the day. That's fine too. Just give them some exposure, give them some reps in real time. Otherwise, like, how are they going to even make your starters better in practice? Because that's where the bulk of your improvements are going to happen. It's going to be at practice. The frequency, the intensity, the intent of which you practice is going to prepare you for that big show. But if they don't actually get real time reps, it's kind of a hard place to be.
Well, yeah, there's nothing worse than a playoff game and when your starters gets hurt and a backup who's never had a single meaningful time, whatever sport it is, comes in and has to just figure it out. And, baptism by fire, it's like it probably didn't have to be that way.
No.
Just manage it a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's pretty good for a first run. Not bad. Obviously, organized chaos going through here. We'll have to fix on that.
That's what we do, man. Organized chaos.
Organized chaos.
Organized
See that?
chaos.
Solving problems one microphone at a time. Thanks for joining us, guys. This is the Performance Matters podcast. We'll see you next time.